30 years. You know the phrase, the fog of war. We're not even allowed, we're not even supposed to watch RT or Sputnik. Now, I'm not a fan of RT or a fan of Sputnik. But if you cannot watch what the other side is saying, how can you possibly form an independent opinion? And if you believe the mass media in Britain, France, Germany or America, you haven't been awake for 2 years. Because for 2 years we had government representatives and so-called scientists standing in front of the television, sometimes on a daily basis, reeling off numbers of dead, numbers of infected, numbers of hospitalised, never telling you the number affected by lockdowns. The same story they're covering in Shanghai, that people are dying because they have diseases, that people are committing suicide, that people are not being treated properly, that people are going hungry, that people are in despair. All those that no doubt are true, but those same stories were not broadcast in England, France and Germany during the pandemic here. We weren't told about the people who died from cancer because they didn't get screened or treated. We weren't told about the people who died of heart attacks because they weren't screened or treated, nor any of these phenomena. And therefore, when they tell you, they are now telling you the truth about the war in Ukraine, don't believe a word of it. By the way, now they're preparing this economic war, by the same story here. Just the same as during the pandemic, more people were driven into penury, and more people, I don't doubt, died as a consequence of the measures taken and the impact they had on healthcare, on screening, on vaccination, on treatment, and on hunger and starvation around the world. According to Oxfam, 120 million people were driven to the point of starvation during the pandemic. 120 million. And so I would say the following as well. The economic consequences of the measures they have taken as sanctions against Russia and the effect of that on Ukrainian and Russian exports around the entire planet, I believe will result in more deaths across the world. The economic impact, more deaths across the world than the war in Ukraine will cause itself. Now, I know that's a kind of a crude way of putting it. That's what we have to measure things against, ultimately. In Sri Lanka, if you look in Sri Lanka today, riots one day after another. Because Sri Lanka, a country that is naturally endowed with an ability to feed itself, in Sri Lanka the people are starving. In India, the same. In Egypt, the same. How can they get the food? The food prices sky. Even in England, all of you know, you go to the supermarket, the price of butter in 2020 was £1.20 for a packet of butter. Now you go to the supermarket, my local Tesco, £2.75 for butter. Like Manchego cheese. Butter. Manchego, the price of Manchego cheese. And almost across the board, prices have skyrocketed. Go into pound shop now, pound shop should be sued. Because it's one thing you're guaranteed of now when you go in the pound shop is that nothing costs a pound. Everything's £2, £3, £5. So much for the pound shop. And so the idea that this war and the economic sanctions imposed as a consequence of it reflects globalization is false, except in this sense. The reorganization of globalization is happening. NATO is becoming the central axis of its imperial globalization. And when they say Sweden and Finland will join, what they mean is that the world is being restructured by the people who brought you the pandemic theatre. They're now bringing you the theatre of war. The theatre of war is economic and political and military. And they're moving first around Russia and between Russia and Ukraine. And then now there's talk about Moldova. Now there's talk about Poland. And of course, behind it all is the ultimate conflict that basically lies at the background of everything. War between China and America.
My friend is from Moldova. She said soon after the 24th of February there were the Azov battalions in Moldova. She's from there.
Maybe, I don't
they
know.
were there.
I don't know. But one thing is for sure, this is a dry run for a conflict with China. The Chinese, by the way, last couple of days, they were organising meetings with bankers. What are we going to do? If the same sanctions that are imposed on Russia are imposed on China, what will it mean? Well, they said in the Financial Times, if you look at it this morning, it says in there, this is the modern day equivalent of mutually assured destruction. Just the same as nuclear weapons were mutually assured destruction with the Soviet Union and the United States of America. Now we have economic collapse that would happen if America and China go to war, and if America imposes sanctions on China about Tibet, about Xinjiang, about Taiwan. These are the issues. Or about, now they might claim, they're defending people from lockdowns when they themselves imposed lockdowns on and off for 2 years. On us. On us.
2 years.
So it used to be said in the Marxist movement, in war, when war breaks out, the enemy is always at home. The enemy is at home. Our enemy is not Vladimir Putin. Our enemy is not the Russian people. Our enemy is not Xi Jinping and the Chinese people. Our enemy is our government, our state, our members, our businesses. They are the enemy of the people in Britain. And look how they treat us. Food prices are skyrocketing. Energy prices are skyrocketing. Our living conditions are almost unbearable. 4 in 10 people are struggling to pay their basic bills. And they were telling us earlier, climate change we need to worry about.
Fighting on the rise.
Sorry?
Street fighting on the rise.
And of course there is violence on the streets, what do you expect? 2 years you lock people down. The young people are told they can't have a life. They've got to live on Zoom. They've got to live on a computer. They've got to become a cyborg. They've got to enter the metaverse. And that's the world of their future. And instead of that, of course, young people, now all of a sudden, once the lockdown was removed, if you walk around London now, people are living in amnesia. Like the whole thing never happened. 2 years never existed. That's how people are thinking. You ask them, suddenly there's a gap, 2-year gap. Because everything's back to normal apparently, but of course it's not back to normal. It's what they call the new normal, and the new normal is totally abnormal.
So what are we going to do about this?
Sorry?
What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about it, innit?
Well, Frederick Engels, when he studied the Crimean War in the 1850s, he observed that there were 5 different powers involved. It was Turkey, Britain, Russia, maybe Iran and France, I think, all involved in the Crimean War. And Engels said, well, it's no good just looking at one side or the other side of the war. He said, we have to understand, in this war, there is a 6th power on earth. And that 6th power is the power of the revolutionary masses, rising up against their rulers in all these countries to take power away from them. And not fight wars on their behalf, but establish a society, peace, freedom and plenty in harmony between the people across the world. And if you ask a Ukrainian and you ask a Russian, you put them together, a normal Russian person, a normal Ukrainian person, they have the same interest. They're almost indistinguishable one from another. Almost indistinguishable. When the war ends, we'll be back again to be associated with each other. Do not believe the idea that the Ukrainian and Russian people are always going to be at loggerheads with each other. If you look at Yugoslavia, the people no longer fight each other. A few years back they were saying, these people are chopping people's stomachs open. Yet now, all that's gone. If you look in the First World War, when the war was over, the people were fraternizing with each other. The Second World War. My mother came to England, she's German, raised in Germany. In the war, when she came to England, there was no hostility to the Germans whatsoever. The automatic instinct of the mass of working people is that our brothers and sisters from other countries are the same as us. And we have no conflict with them. And that is why I say, I point to this argument of angles. The revolutionary awakening of the people is what will challenge the existing powers. But the idea, globalization has gone into reverse. And the wars are beginning a process similar to the run-up to the First World War. We need to prepare for that. Organize, combine, organize the power of working people, trade unions in the workplaces, on the streets in the communities, in order to fight against these powers and link up across the planet. Smash their methods of censorship, smash their methods of control, smash their pseudoscience, smash their computer modelers, smash their technocratic solutions to the planet. They wish to impose dictatorial powers of surveillance and control over the people. We wish to control and to create dictatorial power by the people over the rulers. That is how it should operate. The inversion of the power relationship. Instead of big companies, giant corporations across the world, controlling the world in their interests and manipulating public government to serve their interests. Instead of this, the people from below must exercise control over those they elect, over the officials, over all power accountable to the people, all power to the people take power through revolutionary change. That's how I believe.
Let's fight against NATO, like in the